Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for that warm welcome. Today, all day upstairs, we were doing like a symposium around the intersection of AI and Web3. And one of the things, if you were there, that Kemal did an amazing talk where he was like listing through just some of the areas where Web3 and being able to do stuff on chain can make life much easier for people like me. So thank you, Kemal. And we thought we'd just like take some time to chat about those now.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All righty. So part of what we were, like yesterday, anybody who was here that saw the fireside chat between Eric Schmidt and like you're the CEO of Chainlink was like one of the things that came out of that was like really trying to understand how AI can be enhanced by being able to put stuff on chain, and some of the challenges that we're having in the AI space right now. And it was a great conversation, and Sergey challenged Eric in a number of areas, which I thought was really fun. And there were a lot of things came out of that, you know, particularly when it comes to the ability maybe of single individuals to generate misinformation using generative AI. And one of the things, Kemal, that you were bringing up in your talk today was really about authenticity. And we'd just really like to kind of dig into that a little bit, like, you know, with your expertise in chain and with your expertise in AI as well, like, how can we start thinking about making AI better with authenticity?
Absolutely. Yeah, so with GenAI, ChatGPT, it's become incredibly easy for anyone with very little expertise to download free software and then generate incredibly realistic images or videos that are fake. Mm-hmm. And I was showing an example of Donald Trump getting arrested and getting dragged on the concrete, which is a fake image. So you could start imagining what happens when it becomes virtually impossible to distinguish what's true from what's fake. And we live in a pretty divided world. I think we could say that, mm-hmm. Unfortunately, where it's hard to agree on the most basic facts, like election results, or whether the earth is flat or round. So imagine what the presidential campaign is going to look like when anybody in the world can generate any kind of video of politicians saying anything. It's just going to be madness. If we don't have a way to assert what is authentic, it's just not going to end very well. Fortunately, there is a very clear path forward involving blockchain, where you can sign things that have been captured. So you've started just the sensor of a camera or the audio of a microphone. Mm-hmm. You can have those sensors sign the data, write it on chain, and say, this is what I've observed in that location at that time. And then you can bake in oracles, where you can have multiple sensors capturing the same thing at the same time and asserting that, okay, this probably actually happened. And if you bake that with identity, mm-hmm. with reputation, all of those things are very well known in the Web3 space. Then you start having a solution for creating a ledger for truth, for things that are accepted to be facts. Once you have that, this is really the first building block, the stepping stone for everything else that we can talk about. That, by the way, AI systems will be able to tap into. Because AI systems don't have a notion of what's true, what's not. They just have data coming in. So if they can programmatically go and tap into that ledger to know whether something is true or false, then now they can start predicting, making better decisions, mm-hmm. because they have an anchor for truth, which is very tightly related to the notion of verifiable web that Sergey and I talked about yesterday.
Mm-hmm. And like one of the ways that these models improve is through reinforcement learning from human feedback, and this would be a way for the human feedback to be made more trustworthy also.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think also you're mentioning human feedback, a really key aspect here is identity. We're all social creatures, so we all influenced by what other people say or think. If you take AI now, AI agents are really amazing at impersonating other people, at finding arguments that will convince you of certain things. They can actually be super personalized, so they could look up at your profile online and they can make up the thing that will make you believe them. So if you bake that with impersonating identities or creating fake identities, then now you have a problem. But this is an area that the Web3 industry is actively working on, creating privacy-preserving, decentralized identities. So now you plug it into that other system that we're talking about, and so you can know who says they observed what at what time. And then for that layer of human reinforcement, if someone's going to tell the AI that's true, that's not true, then they can sign that. They can say, I, with my identity, attest to that feedback that I gave this AI.
Right. It reduces like the effectivity of a bad agent, or the effectiveness of a bad agent hacking a model through bad reinforcement learning.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want is a troll farm somewhere giving bad reinforcement to large language models.
Yeah, and we've actually perhaps already seen the symptoms of that, where you've maybe seen the news stories of some of the large language models or ChatGPT, where its results are decaying over time.
Yep, absolutely. And so preserving the quality of that signal is going to be deeply tied to these systems, reputational systems as well, I believe, are going to be very important, so that the AI takes more into account certain feedback. I think that's also going to be part of that solution.
Yeah, and like, let's be honest, we all have biases, right? So it's like, if we're just trapping something based on a bias, we could end up losing very valuable information. But if it's done on identity and on authenticating that identity and that person's reputation, then that could be also a way of really strengthening the reinforcement learning signal. So I think that's really cool. But back on authenticity, though, is like one of the things I'm seeing is that models are getting smaller and smaller. And the scenario that Eric used with Sergey was like, hey, we could have somebody in their basement in Oregon. Anybody watch that Fireside Chat yesterday, by the way? Wasn't it amazing? Yeah, cool. Most people here, cool. So you know what I'm talking about, where you're saying like, hey, you could have somebody in their basement in Oregon, you know, being able to generate misinformation, create a bot farm, create believable bots using LLMs, because you can prime an LLM to, you know, believe it's something and it can talk authentically about being that thing, and, you know, generally impact an election or some other things. So some of the stuff that we're thinking of is a little bit further in the future, like, you know, being able to, sensors being able to work on chain and that kind of stuff. Are there maybe short-term solutions that we could think of that could be done in the next couple of months, where it's like, hey, if we're seeing this type of stuff being produced by somebody, can we tell if it's authentic or not? Are there ways that we can use chain to determine authenticity and that type of thing?
Well, you have to start with the ability to attest something. Someone has to attest something on a chain, right? So I think this is why I think it's going to start with sensors. Mm-hmm. But you could also just imagine from identities asserting, sort of staking that something actually happened. Mm-hmm. So that could work. You could imagine creating communities that would assert, yes, we believe this thing happened, or we don't believe this thing happened. Right. Very much like things that have already started surfacing on social media, except that blockchain adds this ability. First, it's decentralized, so the level of control that could be asserted by a central player who would say, actually, that video, we're just going to let it fly. That one, no. Let's apply rigor for that video. Mm-hmm. You have less of that problem. But then there's this notion of people staking their credibility, which is something that's native to Web3.
Right. Yeah, and I think, that can be done in the short term and be very, very effective. One of the things I'm personally fascinated by with Chainlink and what you guys are working on is functions. And I think, what I want to, when I'm done with this conference, to go home and to start looking at building would be like, there are data sets out there of true stories versus lies, facts versus rumors, that kind of thing. And to build an AI model, that's called a binary classifier, right? To be able to classify two different sets of things, vectorizing these sets of text, turning those vectors into directions that you can then build a classifier around. And it's like, wouldn't it be really cool then if I wanted to make that classifier a source of truth? Today I could run that on any server, but then you have to trust me and you have to trust that server. But if the access to that is verified and if that is on-chain, now you've got that extra level of trust. So that any output, any story that you read could be passed through a classifier like that. Like today you visit Snopes, right? But I don't know if I visit Snopes if they have been bought by a particular political party or not. Right. But if this is something that's on-chain and it's a trusted identity verifying it on-chain, now suddenly we've whole new areas of trust that we can build applications on.
Absolutely. So you touch on two very important points. The first one is connecting Web3 with those AI systems. Yep. Which is why we've launched functions, because we want to enable that connection, and AI is going to be, I believe, one of the big fields that's going to benefit from that connection. And then I think what's going to happen is that the first step will be you connect a smart contract to an AI model, and then you get a first order of magnitude of better things. Mm-hmm. And then it will go into, wait, how do I trust that AI model that's not on-chain? Yeah. And then there are solutions like ZKML, where you could prove that this is the model that was used to answer mm-hmm. the question whether this was true or false. And you've created a hash of that model, and you also don't have to disclose the model, but it's always the same model. ZKML is still pretty expensive, so you were talking about the short term. But I think that's going to be the next question: is how do I trust that model that's not on chain, that it is actually mm-hmm. doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum to solve, and the more I think about it, and the more I think about functions and the intersection of them with AI, is like I can see a whole ecosystem of startups starting up to provide oracles that are, classifiers, where an AI is helping you with something, a computer vision thing, a text classification, or all of those kind of stuff, and it's fascinating where that could go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super stoked about functions. It's great that it's now on mainnet, and I think this is one of those things that this is one of the wild cards of you just give this Swiss Army knife to developers, and then they come back and they do things that will surprise us. So I'm looking forward to you surprising us with the models that you're going to connect on chain.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a play with them. Out of interest, has anybody built like AI models and tried using them with functions? Nobody yet, so it is still pretty nascent. So I'm curious to see where all that goes. So we spoke a little bit about authenticity, and then we spoke a bit about identity. And one of the other things that you were talking a lot about this morning, and it was fascinating, was ownership. And in the AI era at the moment, there's a little bit of a joke in the big tech companies, right, that we don't get anything right until version 3. Right, remember Windows 1 and 2? Nobody remembers that. It took off with Windows 3. The iPhone didn't have the App Store until the iPhone 3. We're all here for Web 3. And I kind of look at AI as right now as AI is version 2. The AI version 1 was when deep learning became widespread and we were able to build models with the likes of TensorFlow or PyTorch. And AI version 2 happened with the emergence of ChatGPT and the large language models and sudden generative AI becoming the thing. But AI 2 has problems. It has road bumps that it's hitting. And we've probably all read about, with generative AI in particular, the accusations of plagiarism. There's an ongoing debate on social media, if you read it, about a database called Books3. And the Books3 databases were alleged that these books were, the authors did not give the copyright, or they did not give the rights to the people training the models to be able to train with them. And now there's a number of smaller lawsuits, and then there's a huge class action lawsuit brewing. And this is the kind of thing that could destroy the momentum that's been built up. And when we start talking about how Web3 makes sense in the AI era, that there's like, there could be some low-hanging fruit there of where Web3 could be useful, that if we do the next generation of models, that we can maybe preempt some of those issues. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so once you have authenticity and you have identity, then you could link them together, and that's ownership. This identity owns this content, this authentic content, and you could record it somewhere. What's pretty incredible with Gen AI is, so the first part is creating fake content, but the other part is creating amazing content. I'm not a good musician, but I've tried creating some rap music. It was not bad.
Can you rap it for us now?
You don't want it. You don't want that. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, okay, this rapper has spent decades becoming good at their craft, and now, I believe me, I'm not a good musician at all, and I was able to generate decent rap music in minutes. Mm-hmm. So decades of training. Probably weeks, hours, months in the studio trying to come up with something that might be a hit. And I downloaded something, I clicked on it, and then I had good music. And that is going to create a massive problem for intellectual property. And intellectual property has been invented just to reward creators, reward people who have worked to create something of value, and for them to be able to say, this is something that I own, I created it. If you want to use it, you got to pay me something. It's like a basic thing. Mm-hmm. And Gen AI is just breaking that. And so this is such an obvious application of blockchain, where you get to record, well, I'm the one who created that, and it's in a publicly accessible, immutable, tamper-proof ledger. Then any other system you can think about will be able to tap into that. So the first thing you'll be able to do is, well, that rapper, if you ever see rap by Kemal, the rapper is going to say, wait, I can prove that, if I just copied it, they could prove that I copied it. Now comes the next problem. How can that rapper prove that I used a model that was trained on their rap music to sell my rap? And this is where the next step comes, which is provenance. So provenance is creating the link between the generated content to the original content, the Kemal rap music to the actual legit rap music, right? And so I'm going with this. I'll see. I don't know where this is going to end, but I'm going with this analogy.
We got to get him rapping on YouTube.
Sure. Now I have to come up with that. So in AI, you can, and you're the expert here. So in AI, you can take a model and trace it back to the data that was used to train that model, and then you can take what you generated with this model, and you could say, well, I used ChatGPT, for example, or Bard to create this thing. So you can create that link between the Kemal rap and the original rap, right? And if all of that is on chain, then now you have a beautiful basis for an incentive system. Mm-hmm. You have an incentive system that you can create, that if any of you wants to buy Kemal music, and I make some money, it's easy for me to pay the person who did the model that I used, and the person who did the model can pay the original rapper for this wonderful music that I'm sure you're going to all want to buy. So now we start seeing appear what is essentially a tokenomics model. Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to be such a profound solution for something that essentially AI has created this problem for society. How do we prevent creators from never being rewarded ever again?
Yeah, totally. And I think there's an important point there that we should also tease out, and that is the incentivization, because one of the things that we can see is that, AI models, generative models can be incredibly powerful, but they're limited by the availability of data. And there are some scenarios out there where we would love to be able to build these things, but not having access to data means that we can't as an industry. And like healthcare being a clear example, right? That, the amount of efficiencies, never mind diagnosis side, just the administration of healthcare, that the amount of efficiencies that could be driven that would drive down healthcare costs, drive up healthcare quality, that AI could do and could bring to it. But because healthcare data is so personalized and is, people can be made very vulnerable by that data, that there is a big high wall built around it, that kind of stuff. But if there were ways that we could anonymize it, make sure it's valid and it's on chain, and then incentivize people to share it, I could see like a future doctor with an AI assist where the revenue going to that doctor, maybe 1/3 of it's to the model builder, 1/3 of it is to the doctor, and 1/3 of it is to the people who provided the data that helped with whatever that thing the doctor was working on. And now it's like not putting people at risk of sharing overly private things, but being able to anonymize properly, use federated learning and all of those kind of things so people feel comfortable in it while also being rewarded by it, instead of a few people making the profit off of your data.
Yeah, it's the thing that makes me so hopeful and happy and excited to see what's happening in AI is the acceleration of scientific discovery. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing to see what AI is able to do in terms of discovering new proteins, new drugs, new kind of material, applying it to the carbon capture problem, and in healthcare, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And one of the big blockers is, as you mentioned, is gathering quality data. Now, the way that historically we've solved this problem is either some players are large enough that they can assemble and have the right deals in place to assemble enough data to create models that are valuable. The other model is open source, which is a phenomenal idea. Is to say, I'm not going to try to make profit of this thing. I wanted to make it public good, and it's a phenomenal movement in the research industry area. But this is very binary, right? Either I just keep my data and I'm not sharing it, or I have to just make it available for free for everyone. Mm-hmm. And the incentive mechanism that we were describing provides something that could be in the middle, where I contribute my data to a certain model, and then this model becomes successful, and I get rewarded for having shared that data. And I think it's going to have incredible applications in accelerating scientific discovery. Sometimes this data is not shared for regulatory reasons. So this is the example of healthcare, where you have some lung cancer detection models that clearly can be built, but they're not widely accessible yet. I want to be able to go and have a full body scan and have the model tell me, oh yeah, if you don't do something about this, like in a year, you might have a problem. This is possible today. This is technically possible today. It's just not available to any of us. And if we solve this problem of data mutualization, then it will become accessible. So I think this is another really phenomenal application of blockchain.
And the heartbreaking part of that is that the scenario you just mentioned isn't just possible, it's actually easy, right? The technical side of that is easy. It's getting over the regulation, it's getting over the access to the data, it's getting over like all of these barriers that are in place of releasing something, and it's a shame, that, and hopefully, again, when we're thinking about like why Web3 makes sense in the AI era, hopefully this is the kind of thing that can help, unblock those types of things. So we've spoken about, what have we covered? We spoke about authenticity, we spoke about identity, we spoke a little bit about ownership. Verifiability, I think, is an important part, so that we can verify models, we can verify data. Any other thoughts on that verifiability?
Yeah, I think verifiability is going to be a really big concept in AI. So we have these amazing systems. They're going to be able to diagnose things for us. They're going to be able to teach, to be wonderful teachers. But we're going to want to have some checks and balances and to be able to verify this. Like, you're going to want to verify what they're teaching our kids. Yeah. There's clearly some moderation going on, right? In the current large language models, they're being instructed to not say certain things or say other things in a certain way, which is not a bad thing in itself, but somebody's making that decision, and we, the users or the public or the people, don't really have a say or even a view into that. So these incredible instruments that are changing the world, there's a way that they're being affected that we can't verify how this is being affected. And so we're using, again, ChatGPT or Bard, and there is a level of massaging of that output, which again, I'm not saying it's good or bad,
sure,
but we will require some verification, verifiability, ability to verify how those models work, what kind of data they've been trained on, and I think that's going to be a very big concept in making this new version of AI work for society. Because another aspect of this is regulators are looking at AI and they're scratching their heads on, how do I deal with deepfake? How do I deal with intellectual property? How do I deal with verifiability? And the risk here is wrong regulation, which would really kill or severely hamper the field, which would be a shame, because we all want to see the benefit from AI. So we need to offer a path to implement those ideas. And I think blockchain is a phenomenal path for letting people prove that they own things, putting together incentive systems to reward creation, and then providing verifiability.
Totally agree. And we're down to 1 minute left, and I really would like to talk about decentralization and that kind of stuff, but we got to keep it super brief. Like, decentralization is a challenge, but what do you think the future looks like in that space?
In less than 1 minute?
In 1 minute and 5 seconds. So,
okay, I would just say that I think AI is too important to be kept centralized.
Yeah.
I think we need to find a path towards decentralization. Bitcoin came about when money was over-centralized, and I think we're going to reach a point where the same mechanism and decision is going to be made for AI. So it's still very unclear what that means technically, but I would leave you with a few questions, like, as individuals, what guarantees do you have that you'll have access to a powerful AI with your own private data? Right? You don't have any of those guarantees today. The other thing that I would say is open source is a phenomenal path to providing more decentralization, and players like Meta and Google are really great at open sourcing things. But the other question I will pose you and leave you with is, can we just rely on the goodwill of centralized players to keep open sourcing their best models?
We just don't know.
We just don't know.
Yeah. So with that, Kemal, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for attending. I hope this was useful to you. It was certainly fascinating for me.
Thanks. You.